Okay, let's go in and start working with editing an image in Camera Raw. So if you haven't used Camera Raw by now, I really suggest you try it, especially if you're a photographer. Now, when I double click on the DNG file, it opens in another application called Camera Raw. So this is a separate application from Photoshop. I'm going to expand this so you don't get confused. Now, here's our image in Camera Raw. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go over the interface of Camera Raw. Then I'm going to go through the tools across the top, and then we'll go into each of these individual sections in a separate tutorial. So let's start by looking at the Camera Raw environment. So first thing is I have my image and it's being displayed in the center, and I can zoom in and out with Control plus and Control minus, and Control 0 will make it fit on screen. Down in the lower left-hand corner, I also have a zoom plus and minus button, or I can enter in a numeric. Okay. Down in the middle, I have the current settings. So if I click there, you'll see that this image is in the Adobe RGB 1998 color space. We'll talk about that more later. It is 8 bits per channel, and the image overall is 3,504 pixels wide by 2,336 pixels. So it's a large image, and because of the size and effect that's in Camera Raw, affords us a lot of capabilities when editing. Now, across the top, we have our basic tools. We have the hand and the zoom. So I can use the zoom just like I can use the keyboard to zoom in and out. And then once I've zoomed in, I can use the hand to push around. And we have our tools for white balance. And we're going to go through all these tools in a future session. Let's hold off on that for a second. Over here on the right, I have a histogram. So if you've worked with Photoshop at all or any image editing application, you'll see something called a histogram. And that is a mathematical readout of the lights, darks, and midtones inside the image. And then it's also broken down into the red, green, and blue values. In the upper left and right-hand corner are these little chips, and that is the shadow clipping warning and a highlight clipping warning. So when I click that, it lets me know if it's highlight clipping, whether there's parts of the image that are blown out that are too white, or the shadow clipping lets me know if there are parts of the image that are so dark that they won't hold ink. Next is the value for the image, the RGB, and then I have the metadata, the f-stop that the camera was using, the shutter speed, the ISO, and the lens. Then I have my basic menus. Right now we're under the basic menu, and that's where you start. And that is things like temperature, tint, exposure, recovery, fill light. And then clicking from the left over, we have our tone curve and parametric curve tools. Over from that, we have our detail tools, which allows us to sharpen and modify noise. Next over is our HSL hue, saturation, and luminance adjustments. Allows us to modify the color throughout the image. At the top, the next over is the split toning, which allows us to create a duotone type of effects where I can mix two colors and then balance one color over the other. Next are various types of ways of correcting lens defects, chromatic aberration, color aberrations, or I can enable a profile correction with a certain lens. Next, I can do things like add grain or vignette, and the vignette is a pushing in with an iris and making the edges of the image either darker or lighter. You see this a lot of old movies where they would iris in on the end of a scene. Then I have some tools for recalibration. So if my camera has a tendency to float towards a red tinge or blue tinge, I can color correct that here. And then I can also create presets and load presets for my lens, for my camera raw, and the last is snapshots. And the idea of snapshots is if I work, I get to a point where I like what I'm doing, I can take a snapshot of the image and then continue working, and then I can choose to export that snapshot or another snapshot, and I can save different versions of the document as I work. Let's go back and click on the basic tab. Another thing I want to bring to your attention is this little tab here on basic, which allows us to do things like set the camera raw defaults, okay? Now, down in the lower right-hand corner, we have the open image button, and that will jump the image as a normal image into Photoshop. We have cancel, which will cancel all the operations that we've just performed. Done will save the image with the operations performed. Now, the cool thing about working with Camera Raw is that the images, the edits to the image hover above the image, and the actual DNG file, the actual Camera Raw file is never harmed. I can always undo the edits that I make to the DNG file. When I create a bunch of changes, I can save them, but the original DNG file is never harmed. So this gives us a lot of power and flexibility. One of the things about Photoshop is that it's very easy to make modifications to an image and then change your mind and realize that maybe you should have done something a little bit differently. And in that case, if you've saved over the original file, well, you're done, or you'd have to start over or something like that, where you never have those types of issues when you're working with the Camera Raw application. So done will save the changes as they are, but I can always remove them. Over on the left is the save image dialog. I click the save image dialog if I want to save what I've done and export it to another format. So I can choose the location, I can choose the file format, I can choose certain modifications to the file, I can save it with, I can do special things with the file name, and so on. So let's stop there. That's our introduction to Camera Raw, and we're going to go in and spend more time with this in just a second.